If you're brand new to Google Forms, I just want to walk you through a couple of tips and tricks that I like to use when I'm implementing a Google Form in my classroom, whether it be for an escape room or just a quick exit ticket. When you log into your Google Drive, you can access a new form by hitting this plus sign over here. And then if you go to the More tab, Google Forms will be that first option, and it will bring up a new Google form. I like to give it some sort of title, so I'll just kind of put in something here, so test example, and once you put that in, it will also change the name for you up here in the name of the file, so whatever you name it, and you can decide to change that. If you'd rather give this a different name up here, you can, but just know it'll auto-populate that for you. When I'm using a Google form for class, I always start by asking for the student name first, and I make that a required question. It typically makes that Google, or it automatically changes the type from multiple choice to short answer. It just knows, I think, when you put in name. And I change that to required, so everybody has to put in their name. And then I go ahead and add a second question, and then I always make this the student ID. It will also change that to short answer for you. And then I go ahead and just remove this response validation for right now. We don't need that for the student ID. So that's how I start everything. That way, when I collect data, I'm able to sort it or add it to another Excel document or something if I need further data from whatever activity I'm doing with my students. So once I have that information, I just want to talk about a couple of things I use a lot. When I'm adding a question, so let's say I'm adding a multiple choice question, and I'm just going to make up some phony stuff here. And let's say we have 3 options when all is said and done. And let's say depending on what option they choose, that's going to determine where I send them next in my form. So let's say like option 1 is the correct answer, and option 2 and 3 are wrong. So once what I can do with this, I can change it so that they can go to a different section based on my answer. So if I want to add another section, you can hit this double bar button here. And here I have a second section. So this would be if we got it wrong, and I'll make another section if they got it correct. So I can go back up here to that question, and we can go to section based on answer, and then I can tell the form where to send the student. So if they go to section 3, if they got it correct, and I can then put in like the next question for them to continue, or if they got it wrong, I can give them some specific feedback on maybe some common mistakes, have them watch a video, to give them a little bit more feedback, even in a multiple choice setting. The other cool thing about this, if you were to go to like the section where it was wrong, in this section you could go ahead and add a video if you wanted to, right here, and it would populate that for you pretty quickly. So if you were doing something, let's say about exponents, if I'm in a math class, you can search for something and just select a video and put it in, and that could help them hopefully determine what they did wrong. And then once they get to this section, what I do is when you get there, I say to go back to section 1. So they can't go anywhere but back to section 1, so that they have to retry the problem. So it's, it's a self-check, and then the students have to redo the problem until they get it right before it will let them move on. So that's one way I like to use Google Forms as kind of a self-assessment for students. And then the other thing that I use a lot when I'm adding a question, if I'm not using multiple choice, let's say I'm using short answer, I can have students submit an answer And I use this response validation feature a lot where let's say that the answer is 112.85. So if they don't type this exact answer in, it's going to give them a custom error text. So you could give them some specific feedback here, maybe a website or another video to go watch. I typically just say, you know, not correct, try again, or I might give a hint if they need it. So that's the other thing I use a lot when I'm wanting students to check themselves as they go through. It lets them get that feedback, that instant feedback right away. And again, the other thing too I just want to mention is after I go through and make my form, I like to preview it and then I enter in all my answers as I'm going through, and I just check to make sure that I've sent all of my answer choices to the right section, and as I'm working through that everything works correctly. So I always do that self-check. And the other thing I just want to mention, when you're making a Google form, I really suggest that you don't make anything too large because the student might not have enough time to get through all of it, and then even if they got halfway through or 3/4 of the way through, there won't be a way for them to submit what they've done so far. And I made that mistake when I was doing my Escape the Alien Invasion breakout room activity. You can see here I only got 11 responses out of like 100 students at the end, but I know more people were participating because I was getting more interaction from students in the Blackboard classroom. And what happened is since I had everything all in one form, they had to get through the entire activity and get everything correct to be able to submit it. Well, I didn't have enough time and it was a little bit too involved. So I really suggest breaking things up a little bit more. So in another breakout room that I did, this Halloween theme one, there were different locks. They had to unlock 4 locks on a door to break out of the haunted house that they had entered. So this time there was a form for each of those locks. So it was only a couple of questions per lock. I think there were like 2 if I click in here. Question 4, 5, and 6. So there were 3 questions for each lock, and that made it much more manageable, and I got a lot more responses from students as they were working through that activity. So I really suggest if you're using that, make it smaller, more actionable chunks for them instead of one huge Google form.